Hey, good morning and welcome back, everybody. It is Saturday morning and this is Multifamily Unplugged. Glad that you are here and I'm super stoked about today's show. Are you on track? Are you off track? Have you hit your goals? Have you exceeded your goals? Are you behind track? And what do you need to do in the fourth quarter here? I always say it's not about how we start out, but it's how we finish. I equate this to contractors we might be working with on projects or doing builds or doing some CapEx improvements. They always start off strong, but boy, they lose attention quick. And so how do you finish? I'm always more worried about how we're going to finish. Have you sat down? Have you done a little evaluation? Have you taken a look at what the goals were that you set at the beginning of the year, where you've gone along the way, maybe where you've gotten off track, maybe you haven't gotten off track and you've committed to your business plan, but what little tweaks can you make along the way? And if you're somebody who'd love to have a conversation about that, I'd either love to have you on my podcast or I'd love to just have an offline conversation. So reach out. But let's kick off today's show here. And, I'm excited about my guest. I first jumped on with him this morning and said, wow, don't I know you? You look familiar. And, it's always funny how people show up in your lives, but we're going to get to know each other a little bit more here this morning. MC Lobsher with Producers Wealth. He's calling in out of Pennsylvania, and we're going to talk about infinite banking and how to use your capital a little bit more strategically these days. Hey, MC, how you doing this morning?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Been looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. I know we've kind of bounced this around a couple of times for schedules and things like that. But hey, one thing I noticed when we first jumped on, and I love this, is you got a great library behind you. You got a lot of books. I think I'm going to have to send you one of mine to add to your library there. But
would love it. Would love
what
it.
What do you like to read? What's most impactful for you in your life?
It's interesting. I read pretty broad. So sometimes my main focus is a bottleneck or a challenge that I'm trying to solve in my business and my investing would be, marketing. So then I deep dive into marketing for about a month. So I would read marketing books, and I love the stuff that Alex Hormozi is currently putting out. So I'm feasting on that and refeasting. I like to read, one book many times and multiple times. And then sometimes, I'm looking for just a little bit more philosophy, life, business, investing. So I read autobiographies, and then sometimes more business, strategy, tactical stuff. So I read a lot of that. And then, I've got a sports background. So I love reading sports, autobiographies. I love it. So it's always very, very inspirational.
Yeah, I'm going to want to hear a little bit more about that. But before we really get into this, one question I always ask all my guests, and I'm doing this because I'm going to write a book called The One Word. But I'm going to take the top 100 unique words that people say. But in one word, what best describes you personally and professionally?
I think persistence. I think I'm one of those folks that I don't give up, and I keep just plugging away at something. So whether it was, and I like I shared, I had a sports background. So from a very young age, I learned that the failure rate is very, very high in sports, and there's a lot of ups and downs, and it's very, very easy to enjoy and high five and smiles in the ups, but then you have the downs, right? And it's kind of how you handle that. And kind of do you self-reflect? Do you look at the lessons that you've learned and then say, well, all right, this didn't work. Let's keep going. Let's try other ways to make this work. And I think that defines a lot of people in sports and in life, because sports is basically life, right? Very competitive. And especially if you're playing competitive sports, so you're going to have peaks and valleys. And it's if you stay with it, you believe in yourself, you persevere, and you're persistent in your efforts. I think, over a long enough runway, you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
I failed so many times in the things that I started. I could write a book just for, some comedy on all the things that I've tried and failed at. But I kept plugging away. I kept persevering. I don't know if it's a stubbornness or just my inability to give up, but I just keep going. And I think at the end, if you keep going over a long enough runway and you're very driven, you're going to find some success in whichever avenue you keep persisting the most.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because I think that you do have to be persistent, especially when we're in a market cycle like we're in now and you're at the bottom and, it feels like you're doing all the right things and you're working every day, but you're not gaining any ground. But you always have to remember what you do today will materialize 90 days from now. And, it might not happen today, but it will happen down the road. You just have to hang in there. And I think persistence is a great place to work from,
Yeah, it's those long hours in the dark when nobody's watching. That's where you really, really, that's where the best work is done. And in the end, that's what actually that's going to make or break you, right? So, and to your point, market cycles, they happen. They will continue to happen. There's good economies. There's bad economies. There's okay economies. There's up, down, and sideways markets. And I think, the really tough economies and the really tough markets, those bring out the real players, the artists, the real operators. So I always say, that's the time to shine. That's when the lights are on. It's easy in practice when everybody's got different color shirts on and you can't tackle this guy and you got to stay away from that guy. But when the lights are on and the stadium's packed and the ball's thrown, now it's live ball. So bad economies and bad markets, that's live ball. Now it's time to play, and this is when the real players come out.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so let's jump into your background a little bit. Take a couple minutes, tell us about who you are, what you do, but talk about that sports thing. What's your background in sports?
Yeah, so I'm originally from South Africa. So I grew up in a pretty interesting time in the country's history. I was a young man when Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And 3 years later, they had democratically held elections, and he became the president. So when, I saw the fall of the apartheid regime into this new form of government, into the first democratically held election. So it was interesting stuff. Really shaped me of who I am today. It was a gift at the time because I learned a lot. Now looking back, it's being painted as rainbows and unicorns and fluffy bunnies. But during that time, I can tell you this, living through that, there's a lot of uncertainty. And this was all across the country, regardless of your background, your ethnicity, your language. There was a lot of uncertainty. Nobody knew what was going to happen the next day. Nobody knew what was going to happen next week, next month. It's very, very tough to plan, right? And you've got a sort of a little bit of a panic that sets into the population, all of them, because there's so many different factions, and that could be an entire podcast by itself. Pick any African country or any Middle Eastern country, and it's not black or white. It's very gray. There's a lot of different variables, right? So, but it was a gift during that time because I saw what happens in large groups when people panic. And I saw also the people that had success during that time stayed calm. They control what they could control. They had strategies to provide certainty for themselves and their families, and they were able to thrive. And then you had the opposite, which was people that just went into full-fledged panic. We all know about the madness of large groups or crowds. fun fact, it wasn't a shocker for me when people were wrestling each other in Costco over toilet paper in 2020. I saw that stuff, as a young man in South Africa, how people can behave, even grown-ups, right? So that was kind of like my background. I had a scholarship to play rugby at university, and after university I traveled quite a bit. I ended up in the United States and ended up playing in the league here up until 2007. So it was fantastic. Great way to see the United States, the world, travel, meet great people, just a great network. But as I was traveling, I love to read, so my background is history and economics. And my parents always recommended books, and my mom recommended this one book to me, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So I was reading that because I was that guy on the team bus or team plane reading books instead of playing card games and video games and that kind of stuff, right? So I read the book, and then I realized, besides that it changed my paradigm and how I looked at everything, I'm like, man, I have a pretty good opportunity here to travel, make a little bit of money playing sports, doing odd jobs, and I could build something to retire to while I'm doing this. A lot of people don't get that opportunity. So I started to, within 6 months of finishing the book, I bought my first property, single family, put some tenants in there, collected the rent, pay all the bills, and at the end of the month, there's money left over.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, just like in the book, cash flow. And the next thing was like, well, how many times can I do this? So I started building a real estate business, but as all real estate investors know, that's when school starts. With that first one, it's like, oh, shocker, tenants sometimes don't pay rent. Hey, they damage your property from time to time. All the fun things. So I look back at it fondly now because, I've got a lot of stories, as every real estate investor have. And as I was doing that, and by the way, I read Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read that book every year or two. It's one of the books in my cycle that I keep rereading because I feel like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and every year I pick something from that book. 25 times, got probably 25 things all picked from it. I think it was about the third or the fourth time I looked at those overly simplified financial statements. And I'm like, oh, there's all these liabilities that I have, that's someone else's asset. And look, I don't mind it as a real estate investor because I can leverage debt, acquire the real estate that produces cash flow, gets appreciation, great tax benefits, all that stuff. But who's the real player here? Because I feel like a piece on the board. Who owns the board? And then I looked at that and I'm like, it's the banks. The banks own the board, like in the game that we're all playing. And then the second kind of thinking was like, well, how do I become my own bank? I got to if the banks have figured this out, how do I build my own board, control my own capital to grow my business and my investment portfolio? And then I ran into the book, Becoming Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash, who became a mentor of mine. And then, as life would have it, things happen in threes. I met this rugby buddy through my rugby network. And we, like rugby fellas do, we grab a cold beer and we grab something to eat and we chat a little bit. And they said, hey, you guys should connect because he was a real estate investor too. So we sat down, we chatted, and he's like, oh, so you're into real estate? I said, yeah, I actually have some properties. And he's like, oh, okay, well, this you're not just thinking about it, and you actually have taken action. And then I didn't realize this before I met him, but his family was one of the biggest real estate investors on the north side of the city of Chicago back then, because I was living and playing rugby in Chicago at the time. And his family also was one of these legacy families, third, fourth generation, that a family business. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, I lived in Chicago forever. Can you share the family name?
I would prefer to just keep that private right now.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Yeah. But the big lesson that I learned from that was that, hey, here's a family that is 3-4 generations, and this family had operating businesses. They generated capital in their businesses. Then they positioned their capital in their own quote unquote family bank, as he was describing. And I was like, okay, He's like, and then we buy real estate with it. I'm like, so it's really a 3-step process. You generate efficient income through your businesses. You position your capital in your own quote unquote family bank, like they do in family offices. And then you leverage that to buy real estate. Interesting. So it turns out that this system, and I mean, like I'm one of those guys that I look at things and I look at what I can copy from people. And I firmly believe you don't have to be a Rockefeller to do what the Rockefellers do.
Right.
So yeah, so I'm like, okay, that's great. So I copied and pasted that, and that's kind of where infinite banking came in, because what they essentially did was they created capital in their businesses. They positioned this capital in life insurance, which again blew me away at that stage, because I was like, life insurance? What are you talking about? Anyway, very specifically designed life insurance policies, which they can use in a strategy. This is where it all comes in, to be their own bank, their family's bank. They always have access to capital. They control their own family's capital to buy real estate. And eventually when they pass away, they will transfer wealth to the next generation and the next generation, all tax-free through proper legal strategies. So I looked at that, and I started at that stage implementing that in my own life. And I started to teach that at meetups. You know, you will know, a lot of young people that listen don't, but we used to, before, meetup.com, you actually had cool real estate meetups where people met up in person and talked real estate and just network, instead of just doing everything online. And I started teaching that kind of stuff at some of these real estate meetups and networks for people just like me. And then people were getting these infinite banking policies set up and come back with me, and I was helping them, this is how you use it, and this is how you kind of leverage it, and that kind of stuff. And that's how my company basically started 10 years ago. I started to realize that there's a massive disconnect in the financial services world between business owners and investors and then financial services, because if you look at how things are structured, it's not very symbiotic, because a business owner and a real estate investor wants control over the capital to grow their business and their real estate portfolio. And that is completely the opposite of the assets under management kind of, model in financial services. So I started Producers Wealth. We've helped over 500 families in the United States in the 10 years implement and execute infinite banking, which is this family bank, the bank of you kind of concept used in family offices. And I started a show in 2016, Cashflow Ninja. So it's 9 years. My company, Producers Wealth, has been around for 10 years. And Cashflow Ninja, I just started interviewing some of my clients, and there were real estate investors, business owners, and so forth. And we started publishing episodes, and that took on a life of its own. And that show just, we hit some of the charts on all the, podcast platforms, and, very, very blessed and fortunate that we've been downloaded, 8 million times, 180 countries. So
wow.
We still continue to do that. So we have a lot of fun. We continue to have a lot of fun, but that's kind of, my backstory and where I started and how I got to where I'm at right now.
That is awesome. I love that number of downloads, 8 million downloads on your podcast. And I love the name of that podcast too. And just a shout out for everybody to tune in is Cashflow Ninjas, which I think is really great. So infinite banking is really, it's a form of control, right? Because now you're not giving up control to a bank with your money, but you're actually controlling your own assets. You're putting money here and then being able to borrow against it, use it, and buy real estate and create wealth for yourself and create cash flow for yourself. And it's a great philosophy for people. How do people, what is the biggest hurdle that you have with educating people about that? What's the holdback for people to understand?
It's a paradigm shift, because what it comes down to is where you warehouse your capital, to have full control over it so that you can actually implement and execute the same principles of banking. Think about it this way. Whether you, when you deposit money into a bank, whether you save it, whether you spend it, or whether you invest it, the bank makes money. When you go to that same bank and you borrow money to save, to spend, or to invest, the bank makes money. The bank makes money in every single transaction there. So if you're putting money into, and if that's your store of a warehouse, I have a checking account too, full disclosure. But if that's your main store of liquidity warehousing, you're just enriching someone else because you're plugged into someone else's system. It's kind of the same thing with Wall Street, you know, and again, I'm not here to bash Wall Street, but money going into, you know, 401ks and IRAs and even Roth IRAs, they're marketed very, very well. It's putting money in a straitjacket. It's stuck. And yes, you can, through self-directed IRAs and Roth IRAs, there's certain things that you can do, but for the most part, it's your money. And if you have a lot of restrictions, and if you do want to do something with it, it comes with more strings attached than Pinocchio had before he became a real boy. So you lose full control. So the whole thing, the first thing that people need to understand about it, and there's so many, you know, social media and online stuff, it's crazy. You know, I usually tell people, whether you listen to anti-infinite banking people or pro-infinite banking people, you got to take a shower when you're done with it, because there's so much nonsense and fluff on the internet, right? But I think the main concept is just, where do you put your money where you have full control over it? You can access it at any given point in time. It's guaranteed to grow tax-free. And of course, you collateralize the cash value in that life insurance policy, just like you would collateralize a stock portfolio like Elon Musk did with his Tesla shares to buy Twitter, or real estate through a home equity line of credit or a cash out refi, or, you know, you could collateralize gold, silver, art, which a lot of brokerage firms do these days. The cool kids collateralize Bitcoin, you know, which is playing with fire, and some dynamite sticks in between, juggling those. But this is just an asset. This strategy, infinite banking, this strategy has been around for 170 years. You can do it with other assets. I know guys that do it with gold in the Cayman Islands. They stock up their gold holdings. They borrow against the gold holdings. You know, they do that kind of stuff. The life insurance portion just has a little bit of a different element to it, because you'll never pay money on the taxes again that's in there through proper strategies. You can collateralize it, meaning the money grows uninterrupted in there as you get a loan against it and use that loan to grow your business, invest in real estate, and so forth. It's a great cash flow management tool. You know, and with real estate, if you think about it, you don't completely cut out the banks. You control your liquidity pool, use those for down payments, or you could buy houses cash if you're flipping, and, you know, and so forth. And then you can also get mortgages, you know, from the bank. So there's a lot of leverage involved there. So if you do it properly, it could be very, very powerful. So it's just a way of controlling your capital a little bit better, and maintaining certainty.
Can I control do I have the same control in a self-directed IRA as I have in infinite banking? Or is it kind of two different? You know, I've had people say, well, why should I do infinite banking versus, you know, just having my money in a self-directed IRA or in a qualified fund?
When you apply for a policy loan, let's just say directly from an insurance carrier, it's a one-page sheet or an online form that you fill out, and the money is in your account 48 to 72 hours later. There's no questions asked. There's not what is it for. There's no custodians involved with this. It's just you and your money, full control. Plus, you're not playing in the government sandbox. You know, if you, let's just say you have a self-directed 401k or an IRA or even a Roth IRA, I think you trust the government more than I do. And I mean, again,
We're not going to go down that road on this show, but
no, absolutely not. But I can tell you, as a young man coming from South Africa, I don't trust any government, regardless of where they're at. So, so what's the main differences? The main difference is the life insurance policy is could be owned by you or your trust. You have full control over it. Nobody tells you what you can and cannot do and what you can and cannot invest in. You get to have both benefits because the money is in there growing tax-free. You get a collateralized loan outside of the life insurance policy to invest in real estate or, other funds that have tax benefits, so you can benefit from those tax benefits where you wouldn't be able to benefit from it in an IRA or a 401k. So there's
how much money do you need to get started with infinite banking?
Yeah, I mean, I would usually say, like, if you've got a nice six-figure income, that's definitely something that you should be looking at as a bucket. And again, this is one bucket. There's many different buckets that you have. Again, you have your way of generating income, whether it's employee, self-employee, business owner, or investor. And then that's one bucket of capital, right? Your other bucket is where do you position and warehouse cash. And then your other bucket is your investment bucket, whether it's, real estate, whether it's notes, whether it's companies you invest in. So if you have a high six-figure income, I mean, it's definitely something that should be on your radar. If you're looking for more control, if you're looking for certainties, for guarantees, and, people would say, well, what's the certainty, the guarantees, and where does that come from? Well, it's institutions that have been around for 170 years. So if you have a track record for 170 years, I'm good with that versus, 401ks. I spoke with Ted Benna on my show that created the 401k plan. That was in the 1980s. So, I mean, you're looking at 45 years now at the time of recording versus 170 years. So, and I've I have a very global perspective on things too, where I still see things happening in South Africa, other countries around the world. I've got family in Australia. I've got them all over the place. So I see what other countries do too. And the U.S., there's no difference between the U.S. government and other governments. It's when you are broke and heavily indebted and desperate, you do things. And, there's a story of the most famous bank robber in the United States, Willie Sutton. And Willie Sutton robbed more banks than any other bank robber in the United States history. And eventually when the law enforcement caught up to Willie, they caught him. And they said to him, Willie, why did you rob banks? Why so many banks? And he looked at them and he said, well, that's where the money's at.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So
if you use that same logic, where's the money at today? Well, if you look at the number of biggest holdings, look at your 401ks, your IRAs. Look at that. I mean, I haven't looked at the latest number, but I believe it was over, $20 trillion or something like that. It was a lot. There's a lot of them. So, when you're heavily indebted and there's a lot of money in one particular place.
Yeah. And what else I heard you say here is that you're not restricted to what you can invest in through your infinite banking system, where like a self-directed IRA, and I'm not bashing self-directed IRAs because I think there's a place in your portfolio for them. You're not restricted though. I could go buy artwork, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And I have the same philosophy as yours. I could see where Roth IRAs would work very, very well. If you had I know it's not late in the game, but let's just say you bought even crypto in a Roth IRA and you bought Bitcoin at a couple of $100. That's not a bad move right there. Because you're not paying taxes on those gains, right? We all know about, this is the media sensationalizing Peter Thiel, right? That, had all these angel VC investments in his Roth IRA. So you have billions of dollars in there. And if you're a note investor with some great cash flow, that's a pretty good place to have it. life settlements. There's a lot of different asset clauses where, it could make sense. So I always try to see all the different sides of, of a particular vehicle. So everything has its place. It all depends what you want to do. I'm not one of those guys that's going to tell you this is it and this is the magic bullet, right? I think a holistic strategy that's in alignment with you want, your vision, and kind of aligned with your skill sets, your knowledge, and your abilities. I think that's the way to go. And that's one of your buckets. That's one of your buckets. So I spread the good word, as they would say, just on, hey, how do you get more control over your capital at all times? How do you have more guarantees, certainties, and predictability? Which, when things get volatile in an economy, that's a pretty good lever to have to pull on, as a business owner and investor.
Yeah. Well, listen, as we get ready to land this plane this morning, do you ever give your clients who have done infinite banking with you options of where they can invest? Do you, like I'm an operator, right? I mean, if you had somebody looking for opportunity, could you direct them to an operator or, build that relationship?
I try to stay out of that lane as much as possible, but just because I think I try to advise just on the particular strategy and the execution of it. I have found that I have a lot of operators that are clients, number one, and then number two, I've got a lot of folks that are very, very drawn to one specific area. So a lot of them that do come to me, they already know what they want to invest in and why, and that's aligned with their knowledge base. So, this is just, the portion of it, one of the pieces of this wheel, this flywheel in their overall strategy. But yeah, we don't recommend where to place capital. There are other people like that out there. We just help people with their overall strategy holistic, and that way too. I could put a set of eyes on a strategy and actually advise without bias, right? Because I'm like, hey, this is how we could tweak this. This is how we can make it better. And I don't have any attachment to a particular asset clause or operators or that kind of stuff. So we just keep ourselves independent and try to give the best, independent advice for our clients regarding their strategy.
Yeah, totally understandable. That's good. That's sometimes a good place to be, is to have that. Hey, listen, I appreciate you being here this morning. I appreciate your insights. You definitely are filled with a lot of knowledge. How do people reach out to you if they have more interest in infinite banking, and how do they connect with you?
I appreciate that. So my company is Producers Wealth. I actually have a book, and I'm giving away a free copy of the book, a PDF, and also a audiobook if you listen, because if you're listening to podcasts, you're probably listening to audiobooks too. The book is called Get Wealthy for Sure, the #1 financial strategy for business owners to multiply wealth predictably. They could go to getwealthyforsure.com to get a ebook and a audiobook. So it's getwealthyforsure.com. And also on that page, you'll see a link to videos where we show case studies on actually how this strategy is implemented and executed. And then there would also be a link to book a call with myself and my team. So that's all at getwealthyforsure.com.
Awesome. Appreciate that. MC, thanks for being here. Hey, are we connected on social media? If not, we should be. So let's make sure that we make that happen.
Absolutely.
I think that people can find you on Instagram and LinkedIn and all the platforms just as they can myself as well. I always encourage people to connect with myself and my guests and to help build your show up. And I'm going to move you back to the back room. If you hang around for a minute, we'll close this out. But I'm going to say goodbye. So
awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Thanks for being here. I appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, everybody. That was an awesome show this morning. MC Lofsher with Producer's Wealth. Make sure you reach out to him and talk a little bit more about this infinite banking process. He's about cash flow and how do you create more cash flow for yourself. He's got a great podcast out there, Cash Flow Ninja. Make sure you tune in, listen to that, and connect with him on social media. Thanks for tuning in this morning. Connect with us on social media. If we can do anything for you, don't hesitate to reach out. Look forward to talking to you again next week. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.